everybody. My name is Greg, call sign KG5OCW. Normally, I've been doing some videos of me out in the field doing QRP stuff, but today I wanted to try to tackle a different topic that I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with, and that's homeowners associations. The news the past couple weeks is the Amateur Radio Parity Act has been quietly killed off. So, or if it's not dead yet, it's pretty much dead. There's a lot of controversy about that one, mainly that the language wasn't strong enough, and for those folks who didn't live in an HOA, there wasn't a lot of favor for it. But for those of us that do, it offered us a little glimmer of hope that maybe we'd have a chance to set something up without having to deal with strict HOA guidelines, which vary from place to place. The argument, for it is for people like me. I mean, the argument I heard is that you shouldn't buy land or anything with an HOA. If you're an amateur radio association, you should know better. But I can't agree with that because I bought my house in 2008, and I didn't get interested in ham radio until 2016. So by that time, I was firmly ensconced in the tendrils of the homeowners association. So it's not really an option for me to say, oh, I should just go back and buy a new house somewhere. I mean, I guess I could, but that would be a bit of work. So anyway, I was able to put up an HF antenna, and I'll put a video link to what I've got set up. I've actually got two HF antennas, and they both work pretty well. One works really well, and one works okay. But the good thing is that I have no fear of the HOA coming after me for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to cover that now. So here I have my 5 ways of dealing with a homeowners association. Step number 1 is you have to read your guidelines. You have to understand your guidelines. When you bought your house or you bought your property, if you live in an HOA, I'm sure you got a pamphlet or a CD, or if they give CDs anymore, an online link with the laws, the governance laws of your HOA. You got to read that and understand what it means in terms of putting up an antenna. Now, in the instance of my house, the rule was no antenna can be visible from the street. So that gave me a lot of leeway. I mean, I couldn't put up a 50-foot tower or anything, but it gave me some hope for putting up something because my house is kind of up on an angle up from the driveway. So anybody driving by, it's going to be tough for them to see an antenna unless they're looking for one. I'll put a highlight of the exact verbiage here. I'll put a sub video in it or something. But basically it just said that the antenna, you can have one as long as it's not visible from the street. Now I have no street behind my house. There's only one in front of my house. So that gave me some leeway, gave me some hope. So read those, make sure you understand what you can and cannot do, and that will give you some knowledge, some bargaining power when it comes time to submit your design to the HOA, which I'll get to that in here in a minute. Step number 2, this is probably the most important of any of these, is get to know your neighbors. Be friends with them if you can. There's nothing worse in the world than having neighbors that you don't get along with, and if you don't get along with your neighbors and you set up a big giant antenna, I can guarantee you the first thing they're going to do if they don't like you is they're going to report you to the HOA. But I mean, if I have pretty good relationships with my neighbors. I don't know them a whole lot really that well, but most of them, when they saw me putting antennas up in the backyard or temporary ones, they were curious about what I was doing, and when I explained it to them, they thought it was pretty cool. And what I ended up putting up was not very egregious. You'll see a picture of it in here. But, you got to get on your neighbor's good side. And if they're happy with your antenna, the chance of somebody reporting you to your HOA goes way down because they're the ones you're going to be dealing with, mostly. Some HOAs, well, almost all of them, have somebody who will drive around and check covenants in your neighborhood. They'll report things. And mostly they're not looking for antennas. Most of them probably don't know what a ham radio antenna is. They're looking for things like weeds and cars up on blocks and, ugly old abandoned toys in the side yard and those kinds of things. They're not going to be looking for an antenna, so we got to have that on our side too. But anyway, get to know your neighbors. I think that's the most important thing on this list, and get them on your good side. All right, number 3, get to know your HOA members and your HOA manager if you can. Go talk to the guy. If his office is local, go down there and be friends with him. If you got him on your side, or him or her, and whatever board he's reporting to, then you've got that in your favor. What I did is I went down, and I knew the guy. I went down and talked to him in person and said, "Hey man, I got an antenna that I think meets the guidelines. It's not visible from the street. What do you think?" And he was real friendly. He said, "Yeah, that's cool. What you got to do is submit a written." In my case, I had to do like a drawing and a description of my antenna. And sure enough, I drew that up and submitted it to the board with my plans, where I wanted it. And what I settled on was the Hustler 4B TV vertical antenna. Many reasons, because my yard is not very big. I can't put like a dipole up way up high. That would obviously be visible from the street. But a vertical, I could set up and just put some radials on it, and it's going to pretty much disappear. So that's what I settled on, and I drew a picture and I submitted it to the HOA, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, they came back and they approved it. They didn't, I don't think they even knew what it was, but they saw my drawing and they saw that it was okay. One of the conditions was they moved my original location. Originally, I wanted to put it in the corner of my yard, furthest away from the house, and they didn't agree with that, so I had to move it kind of directly behind my house, and which I understand, it makes it less visible from the street. Maybe not as effective, but it really didn't make that much difference in the long run. The other thing I had to do was paint it to match my house trim, which a lot of HOAs say that if you want to put a shed or anything outside your house, it's got to be matched. The paint style's got to match your house. So I just painted it. It's no big deal. And once I painted it, it's kind of a brown color. It pretty much disappears. Unless you're looking right at it and you're 100 feet away from it, you're not going to see it. It's just, unless you're looking for it, it's not there. So get to know your HOA board members, and talk to them in person. And that kind of overlaps with 5. And that is, if there's some wiggle room in your guidelines, submit a proposal. And that's exactly what I did. You can't just, you can just stick something up and hope they don't notice, but you're better off, getting approval, getting your guidelines in and getting it submitted. That's what I call the worry-free option. Because if they come back and approve it like they did with me, then you're worry-free. You don't have to worry about hiding it or stressing out somebody's going to report you. And especially if you're on good terms with your neighbors and you've got approval, then you know what, you're good to go. So that's number 4. If there's some wiggle room in the guidelines, submit a proposal and hope for the best. Now, there's a danger to that. If they don't approve it, then you're going to be on their radar, right? And if you submit a design for your antenna and it doesn't come back, then they're going to say, hey, this guy might be putting up an antenna. Let's keep an extra eye on him. So there's a small danger to that. And that goes back to make sure you get to know your HOA members and the manager. And if you've got a feel for the way he's leaning, then it might not be a big deal to submit your request. So if 4 doesn't work out, then there's another option, and that's what people have been doing for ages, and that's what we call stealth antennas. There's tons of stealth antenna options. There's end-fed. That's just a wire with maybe a 9-to-1 on-in or something, and you can just snake that around your yard, and chances are nobody will ever see it. There's attic antennas. I couldn't put an attic antenna in my house because my house has like mylar insulation on the underside of the roof, and it would just reflect any antenna back at me. So that was never an option. But for most people, if you've got a tall attic, you could stick a dipole in the attic or something, and you're good to go. There's doublets you can stick up. There's plans for antennas on snaking along fences or electrifying your rain gutters. There's tons of options. There's a book. I think it's the ARRL antennas for small spaces. If I can find it, I'll put a link to it in the video. It's a fantastic book. It's got all kinds of options for putting up small space antennas, and there's just tons of things you can do there. I put up an end-fed antenna. It's invisible from the street. It's invisible from pretty much places in the yard even, and it's about 80-something feet long. It just kind of snakes around my yard. It doesn't ever get really high, But what does allow me to do is get on the bands that my vertical doesn't support. 30 meters and 80 meters. 80 meters is kind of dodgy because it's not high, but for local rack joing, it works all right. So that's an option. So anyway, those are my top 5 ways for dealing with your HOA. Your mileage may vary. It helps to have an HOA that'll work with you. But I'll go ahead and review what I said. So number 1 is review your guidelines, review your HOA documentation. Number 2 is get to know your neighbors. Get on their good side. That's very important. That's probably the most important thing on this list. Number 3 is get to know your HOA members and your board manager. Talk to them in person. That helps. Number 4, if there's wiggle room in the guidelines, submit a proposal and hope for the best. And if you get approval, that's your worry-free option. You're good to go. And number 5 is explore stealth antenna options. Like I say, there's tons of options out there, and I actually kind of like trying to figure out stealth antennas. I really do. Like, if you could put something up and nobody notices it and it's effective, and you've put the design work into it, then that's a pretty cool feeling when you get the DXQSO, and it's certainly possible even with the band conditions as they are today. Anyhow, thanks for watching. This is Greg, Kilo Golf 5, Oscar Charlie Whiskey 73s.